Right. Could you take some examples of ads that initially, maybe there was no like, but then they got talked about a lot because they were producing results?
And so we, for many years, tested the immersion in Super Bowl commercials. We did this live in a bar. So because we have wearables, right, I can collect data anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a quiet lab space. And so what we found consistently is that the um, ad um, there's a thing called the ad measure. So it's USA Today is a U.S. newspaper. People rate thousands of people rate these ads for liking. So we compared the liking measure to the immersion measure, and we found a zero correlation between liking and immersion year after year after year. So much so that we just stopped doing it because it was the same result every year. And yet, some of the highest immersion ads were the least liked. For example, in the 2018 Super Bowl, people can Google this later. There's an ad for a new flavored Diet Coke called Diet Coke Twisted Mango, with this woman being filmed behind a yellow wall. It's very asymmetric. She's super tall. She has weird clothes on. She's trying to dance in a weird way. And it's like, this is a train wreck, but the brain loves it. And uh, when Diet Coke uh, in 2018 released these flavored Diet Cokes, it's the first time in 2 years that they had actually a sales bump in Diet Coke. So, of course, they had a new product, but also they had advertising around that new product. So, again, I just want to make sure that we're moving behavior and not moving self-reported liking. The complication with our brains is that we have this, I call it the Freudian hangover from this weirdo Freud. We think if I just poke you the right way, I can make the unconscious conscious. You can't. The brain doesn't work that way, right? Most of what's happening is unconscious, and then we try to tell a story consciously about why I did something. But we have technology that lets us tap into that unconscious network now, and that's where the real magic happens. But our brain, because it's so energy hungry, is always doing these valuation comparisons because it needs to save energy, or it's evolved to save energy. And
Mm.
so once we see this big metabolic investment that is immersion, the brain's like, oh, holy crap, I love this thing. Give me more of this. So that's, I think, the key insight. And to be able to do that from smartwatches, took me 20 years. I work slow.
The ad that you talked about, something weird happening. Um, in a way, it could be said that it was creative because, it was not something linear. It was not something expected, predictable. It was like, something out of the box. I mean, to use a cliche. So, is there any emotion and creativity link that brain kind of takes notice when something unpredictable predictable is happening? There is a twist with some familiarity or something like that?
Great question. Great neuroscience question. So the brain loves the new thing. So part of this immersion network, this dopamine system, strongly activates when I see something that is new or unusual or surprising. And so what we found is you've got about 15 seconds to capture that attentional response and then subsequently can build up the emotional value of that experience. So the first thing is to really open hot, do something unusual, do something different. People go, okay, this is not normal. What's happening? You get that attentional response, but now I've got to build in story structure. So as you know from the work I've done, once I get your attention, I've got to really build a narrative arc where I'm increasing the emotional tension of that story that I'm telling. What we found is that this sort of old fashioned, this was kind of common in the 90s, is quick cuts, no story, just moving stuff around. That doesn't work. That just modulates that attentional response. But after a while, you're like, it's just boring because I don't know, there's no story here. It's that narrative arc that is the most effective way to sustain immersion and therefore to influence behavior. So we've even seen people use our platform like politicians to do these 6-second bumper ads. And you can tell a story in 6 seconds, right? There's a real narrative arc. So
Correct.
someone
Yeah.
challenged Ernest Hemingway to tell a story in only 6 words. And the 6 words he came up with were for sale, baby shoes, never used.
Uh,
That's a story. That's poignant.
so emotion and call to action. So ads are getting smaller and smaller. The thumb stoppers are like really, 6, 8 seconds. And this whole debate about we should get a minute to communicate because how do you tell a proper story? Even Google and Facebook want to tell 1 minute long stories, and so all this is going on, but 6 words can do it. So is there a time correlation with emotion, effectiveness, and call to action?
What a great question again. So, one of the companies you just mentioned that makes most of their money from advertising, a senior vice president recently asked me if you could create an immersive ad in 1 second. And my answer was no. 1 second, that's just attention. I can't get enough emotion. 6 seconds works. What we have found, I've now seen immersion data for thousands of ads. And what we found is almost always shorter is better. Make the case, get to the point, and have that call to action or the branding moment at a peak immersion moment. So often we see, even in shorter ads, 30 seconds, a nice little narrative arc. And then when immersion's low at the end, now it says, hey, remember our stuff. You really want to have those branding moments at peak immersion moments. So have the logo when there's an emotional peak, have something else. Why have the call to action at the end? You can do it twice, you could do it 3 times, right? Or have that branding in there. So I think this is upending that sort of normal structure. Here's a concrete example. A number of the movie studios use our technology to create movie trailers, which are generally between 2 and 3 minutes, theatrical trailers. If you look at those, and people can look later online, they tell half of a narrative arc. They introduce characters, they put them in some weird environment, and then they create a crisis, and those characters have to begin to resolve that crisis, and they stop at the crisis point. And now they say, buy a ticket to find out what happens. Now, that's a smart advertising approach, right? Find out what happens by buying the ticket. So I think advertisers should think more about that. We're not going
Mm.
to tell you how the story ends. We're not going to tell you why the toilet paper is the best in the world or I don't know, donuts are wonderful. Let me
Yeah,
wonder. Make me go in.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Tease me a little bit.
Yeah. And would you say that that is the construct of a thriller as well? There's a death,
Yes.
something has happened,
And you
you
have some suspects who look like they
characters,
did it and they're
one a
just a red
scene. Yeah.
herring. Yeah, I love that. Let's make advertising more like thrillers. Oh, brilliant. If it's a great story, if it's a great communication, we do not see a degradation in immersion over time. You can watch it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. One of the best ads we've measured, again, people can Google it later, is an ad created by BBDO for Guinness Beer. And the ad is called Empty Chair. It almost maxed out the scale. I have played that ad in talks hundreds of times. I will still tear up when I see it. It's so beautiful. It's so perfect. Not only is the story beautiful, but it has what I call product story congruence.
The choices we make reveal the true nature of our character.